Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shortwave. Our show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is sponsored by Camp Constitution. Among other things, we run a week-long family camp, actually a week and a day. And next year's camp will run from, this year's camp, July 12th to the 19th at beautiful Towanipi Retreat Center in Ringe, New Hampshire. And for more information, go to www.campconstitution.net. And today's show is we're being joined by one of our popular instructors, Tom Moor, also a local historian. Midnight Rider Paul Revere is his specialty, and he's going to start with something he sings at campfire. A little piece he does at campfire. So, Tom, let's start off with some music, brother.
Called the Midnight Ride for 5 years. I did many shows on the great Paul Revere at his in Lexington and other places. And this is a little song I wrote that was the theme of our podcast. I'm just going to play a little bit of it. Late last night in Lexington, I ran into Paul Revere. He said, nobody's waking up. What's going on around here? Freedom! Freedom! Rider in the night. Are you coming with us or going down without a fight? Freedom! Rider in the night. Are you coming with us or going down without a fight?
Well, very inspirational. Tom is one of our, I mentioned before, one of our instructors, and his specialty is Greater Boston Revolutionary War history.
Yeah, that's when we did the Midnight Ride. We talked a lot about that. We went around to a lot of the famous historic sites. We talked to a lot of the historians, and I'll never forget, okay, so this is 2015, 1775, 240 years ago. Wow, almost 2.5 centuries ago. That's when most historians, a discerning historian, of course, we love July 4th, 1776, the year of the Declaration of Independence. But for a lot of us here in New England, America was really born that night and that morning when we squared off against British troops. They mowed through the town of Lexington, and then they went into Concord. But all of our militias mustered together. They came together as an army, and the reason they were not caught off guard was a gentleman by the name of Paul Revere, who was he was a courier rider for the Committees of Safety, of which Warren basically gave him the news that the British were coming, and
Dr. Joseph Warren.
Dr. Joseph Warren, great patriot, and not given enough play, in my opinion, as one of the great patriots of the American Revolution. He knew that the British were coming. They didn't know what route they would take. They were either going to go, Boston was out on a neck. Picture a great big head with a thin neck of land, and it was surrounded by water. They didn't know if they would move the troops across land through the neck or go across the Charles River. So they said, one if by land, two if by sea. The sea being the Charles River, and of course they hung how many lanterns? 2 lanterns in the belfry of the Old North Church. Paul was on the opposite side. He saw the 2, and he knew they were going to be rowing across, which would take a long time, which is good.
What was the name of the ship? The British ship that was right in the that they had to sort of row across.
Yes, sir. You know, that was the Somerset, a British man of war, a great big ship with a lot of cannon. And they muffled the oar. I have heard some accounts that they actually used, they got some woman's petticoat to muffle the oars with as they rowed across so that the British wouldn't hear them.
And Paul Revere wasn't just the old misinformation. He ran around, the British are coming, the British are coming.
No.
And people just sort of took action.
Yes.
talk about his network.
Well, there are two misconceptions. A lot of people say, the first thing that a lot of historians say in other parts of the country is, he wouldn't have said the British are coming because we were still British. We were all British at that time. Actually, here in New England, and some folks like Pastor Garrett Lear, the Patriot pastor, would say, you know what, we colonials, they would have called themselves not British, but colonials. We were proud colonials and had been from the day we stepped off the Mayflower. We were separatists. We believed that Great Britain was corrupt, and we were coming to make a new biblical land with the Geneva Bible and some copies of the King James to Plymouth and so forth. Some 150 years, believe it or not, we were here in New England 150 years before our revolution, maybe a little bit longer actually. And so while we weren't really British, he did not say the British are coming. He said the regulars are out. He was giving out specific information. The regular troops of the British Army would be marching west, basically west through Middlesex County, and this was called the Middlesex Alarm. It's kind of a funny name for a county, but it's actually the most populous county in Massachusetts to this day. And so we had this, interestingly, we had this system of militias all the way back since the Mayflower. And every man from the age of, I believe, 16 to age 60, you had to serve in that militia. They were trained.
With a few exceptions.
They fought great wars. King Philip's War against the Indians. King Philip's War, that was a terrible war back in the 1600s. Yes, and I believe you are descended from the great Hannah Duston. They were great. They were massacres.
And so actually, there was a lot of Indians that had converted to Christianity as well, and they were pretty much targeted as well by King Philip and his braves.
Yeah, so what we're saying is, at the time of the American Revolution, these militiamen, they were well-seasoned. They were from a generations and generations tradition. They had fought the French and Indian Wars side by side.
Yes, a lot of them had experience.
Side by side. Several of my ancestors fought with Rogers Rangers. They were the New Hampshire Regiment, Rogers. And, so then here's what happens. The American Revolution rolls around 20 years later, and Rogers joined the British. But we got, I think, the best of Rogers Rangers, that being John Stark of New Hampshire.
Oh, Stark, that's right.
And he fought very bravely as a patriot on the Patriot side. Daniel Moore, my ancestor, was one of his captains. They lived a long time. They lived to see the State House in New Hampshire. Every year we see something different. A few years ago we went to the New Hampshire State House, and some of those patriots lived to see that State House built. A lot of them lived a long time. Stark, I think, lived almost to age 90 years old. My ancestor lived into his 80s.
Oh.
Thomas Jefferson late into his 80s, and John Adams into his 90s. They both died on the same day, 50 years to the day that the Declaration of Independence was signed. Everybody knows that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, but it's not ironic that John Adams should die on the same day. He was the one that harangued. He was the lawyer. He was annoying. He was the spark. He lit the spark in everyone. Jefferson was very quiet. He was a good writer. But he was clamoring. Adams was clamoring to get that doggone thing signed and done and declare independence when nobody did. Anyone who has ever seen the great musical 1776, it opens with the song called "Sit Down, John," and all the other patriots are telling John Adams to sit down and shut up because they don't want to declare independence.
So let's getting back now. So Paul Revere is on his horse. He's crossed the Charles River, and he's going out to every Middlesex town to warn that the regulars are coming out.
Right.
And take it from there. He gets to Lexington.
Yeah, well, here's an interesting, we like to throw out some interesting facts at Camp Constitution you don't get anywhere else. Revere, actually, everybody at those days was a farmer, and everybody farmed. Even in the cities, you had your gardens and so forth. So, Revere, I don't believe, had his own horse. He was riding on Deacon John Larson's horse.
That's right, Deacon Larson.
And the thing of it is, a horse was today's equivalent of a Porsche or a Lamborghini. Now, why do I say that? Because if you're a farmer, what do you want? You want oxen that'll pull that plow. Stronger animal.
Pickup trucks, right?
Yeah, that's your go-to animal. And you know what? The best thing is when you're done with the oxen, you can chop it up and eat it, which is what they did. We here in America, this isn't France, we didn't chop up a horse and eat the thing. But so you really, the gentry class would be the ones like Washington that would have the horses. Okay, so anyway, yes, Revere saw he was standing on the opposite shore. He had rowed over a long time ago, and he was waiting to see whether they were going to come by land or sea. He knew they were coming by sea, and so he made his famous midnight ride. It's very interesting. When I sat down, my very first podcast of the Midnight Ride, that was the name of the podcast, I sat down with the curator of the Revere House, and he said he had been working at that house for many years, and he never got tired of that story. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. So you look at the American Revolution, you look at great patriots like George Washington, who we admire, Jefferson, these great patriots that were later presidents and so forth, and you admire them, you study them, and we go over in great detail in Camp Constitution. But could you really be them? Could you really be George Washington? I know I sure as heck couldn't. Revere is a little different. He was a working class guy. He was a smith. He was a very good silversmith. He didn't make George Washington's teeth. That's a misnomer. However, yes, he did not. However, as Hal and I know, after the Battle of Bunker Hill, they threw poor General Warren that died. The British threw him in a pit with a lot of bodies. In probably the first case of using forensic medicine in America, Revere was able to identify Warren's teeth. A few months later, they wanted to give him a proper burial where he had been thrown in a pit. That's kind of a grisly story. But anyway, getting back to Revere's ride, he was a man of many talents, and he was a working class guy, a middle class guy, and it seems like most people can identify with him today. And we talk about waking people up to the Constitution.
And also,
yes,
not just being waking up, but being organized, because when Paul Revere went out, other people were trained to go out and warn others. So it wasn't just one guy riding around by himself. It was numerous people. When they heard the word from Paul Revere, they went out further.
Yes.
And it's amazing how fast the word went out. Rindge, New Hampshire, where we hold our camp,
right,
about 75 miles.
That's right.
To Boston, and the Rindge militia answered the alarm. Now, it took them
right.
a while to get there. It took them a while. I mean, they weren't there. The battle was over at Concord, but they stayed around for the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Yes, so that was the thing, that there were a number of riders that night. One of the riders is Dawes. And there's somebody, of course, everyone knows Longfellow's famous poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. Listen, my children, you shall hear the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere.
A poetic license there, but
right.
It's still a good poem.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, somebody wrote a poem about Dawes, and Dawes made it, Dawes was another rider, and he went across this we're talking about the neck of land, so he went the landward route, and you had a number of riders going different routes. So if they captured one of the riders, at least one rider would get the alarm out. So Revere rides into Lexington after going through.
It's what, about 5:30 or so in the morning?
No, it's like around.
Well, it's about late.
Yeah. So Revere rides in, and
pretty late. That's right.
Yeah. So I hadn't laid this out yet. So what were the British coming to get? They had two different objects. So the colonial capital was at Concord, and that's where the guns were, the guns and the powder. So Revere had actually made a ride up to New Hampshire a few months earlier, and my ancestor was involved in that.
In a very bad snowstorm, too.
Yeah, so basically the New Hampshire Patriots went and they commandeered, good word, the powder and the powder at that fort, which is Fort William and Mary?
I believe so.
Yes, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And they got some guns and some powder, and that was removed to Concord, where they knew that the fighting was going to be around that area. And the other thing that those troops are coming out to get two very important patriots, and those were John Adams, perhaps one of the, John Hancock.
John Hancock.
One of the richest men in the colonies from shipping. He inherited his uncle's shipping business. And then there was Sam Adams. And I'm actually enjoying a good Sam Adams right now. Sam Adams beer is brewed here in Boston. And but Sam Adams, yes, he was a patriot, and they were both very influential. Adams was really what you would call the rabble-rouser. He was the firebrand. He was like the Patrick Henry of the North, around here. And his Sons of Liberty, they would have a little bit of ale, and they would go out, and they would get everybody fired up about liberty.
And they would dump tea in the harbor, too.
So, yes, the Tea Party happened in 1773. And
by the way, our camp this year will be taking a trip to the Tea Party Museum,
yes,
which is just a very short distance from where the original Tea Party took place on Griffin's Wharf.
What most people don't know is, you see the picture and you think, okay, they dumped a few chests of tea in it, and it looks maybe a couple 100 pounds or whatever. No. They dumped 90,000 pounds of tea. That's right, 45 tons of tea dumped into the harbor, eventually resulting in a new free nation and a lot of extremely nervous fish.
At 4 o'clock, of course, in the afternoon is when they got very nervous, right?
Yeah.
so anyway, so now Paul has got to Lexington. It's pretty late, it's either early in the morning or late in the day, and he goes to the house where John Hancock, the Hancock Clock House, which is still standing today.
It's still there in Lexington. A lot of those great old houses are still there. The Buckman Turner, that was actually the Buckman Tavern, rather, right across from the Green.
You're thinking of Buckman Turner Overture, right?
Yeah, there was a band that were taking care of business. Well, they were really taking care of business in Lexington that night, let me tell you. So Revere, as I said, he got there around midnight, and they told him to keep it down. He said, you're going to have a lot of clamor around here soon enough. The regulars are out. And this is an interesting thing to know. Every year in April, I've covered this a couple of times, at midnight there is a reenactment, and it is always the Sunday before Patriots Day. We celebrate and take Patriots Day off, which is on a Monday, Marathon Monday. We run the Boston Marathon. But the night before that is always the night that they reenact, and it's usually a couple of Boston cops riding on their horses.
So this year, will it be the 20th or will it be the week before? It was a Monday.
I believe, let's see, we are having dinner with the Patriot Pastor on the 18th. So that will be the night of Sunday the 19th. Yeah. They will reenact that in Lexington. And it's kind of like it's cool. It's kind of like another Halloween in the town of Lexington. All the kids come out with their parents. Everybody's up late, and they reenact this great Paul Revere's ride. And Revere comes riding into town on a horse, and you hear this horse come galloping up way, way, way down the street a mile back. It's really kind of haunting. And then, this is funny, so 2 minutes later, here comes Dawes, right? Dawes was 2 minutes late. He just missed his shot at history. And somebody wrote a poem that says, nobody remembers me because his name's Revere and my name's Dawes.
Well, I've been participating the reenactment in Lexington, the battle reenactment.
The Battle Green, yes.
Yeah, for the last 12 or so years, I usually take friends, family
That's
members.
right. So the following morning, after this midnight ride we're talking about, then you have to get there real early, like before 5 o'clock in the morning, and they reenact the entire battle.
Yep. And what happens is, and it's very, they have about maybe, I think there were about 85 militia members, Lexington Minutemen.
Yeah.
They usually have about 40 or 50 people that participate in this. And some of the people are actual characters. One of them is Prince Esterbrook, who was a black slave that was wounded. And Prince was probably in his early 20s. The gentleman who's been doing it, Mr. Charlie Price, he's been doing it for a long time now. Charlie's probably in his late 60s. And every year he gets wounded. There's another character, Jonathan Harrington.
Right.
And across the street from the Green.
Harrington's house is still there.
Yes, and he actually
was
wounded.
shot. He was mortally wounded, and he died at his wife's feet right at the doorstep
and they
of his house.
reenact that. Right?
Very dramatic.
I think the people who own the house, I guess the agreement is they have to participate in this annual event. But prior to as the British are approaching the Green, you see two guys. You see someone dressed as Paul Revere and somebody else drag this suitcase, or carry this suitcase, this trunk across the Green. And basically, that was John Hancock's computer.
Right.
Laptop.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So they had their papers in the trunk, and this is sort of like the genesis of what later became the Fourth Amendment to our Constitution, which is the right of privacy in our personal effects in our papers. And, we talk about this. We talk about what was going on then with all of the amendments to the Constitution, why they were made. The British, the British objections, the British tyranny, and really what kind of tyranny we're fighting today. And the Fourth Amendment, of all the amendments in our Constitution, of course, the Second Amendment is greatly abused, but the Fourth Amendment is probably the most abused. And, Hal and I actually know probably one of the America's foremost advocates of the Fourth Amendment is Dr. Catherine Albrecht. Hal and I have both taken part in, speaking with Catherine in Faneuil Hall. Getting back to Lexington Green, so this is very interesting. So Lexington, basically, what happened was they knew these troops were coming. Now, in those days, there were no police, so your militia were like your local town police force. We were a more godly country. There wasn't a whole lot of theft and things like that.
No drive-by shootings.
Yes. So basically, what these militia were doing, they were not there to take on the British militia. That's not what happened at all. They knew these troops would be rolling through that main road, which is now Massachusetts Avenue, which was at that time called the King's Highway. They knew these troops would be rolling through, so they were just going to make a stand on Lexington Green, orderly, and watch them march by. And they're just there to make sure there wasn't going to be, basically looting, other things that can happen with soldiers around. Yeah, we're not going to go into all the things that happen with soldiers like that marching through your town, but they were just basically there to make a stand. They were not there to confront these troops. So when the troops came through, you have an entire regiment. You have about 800 men, and the Lexington men, of course, even though the alarm had gone out, we had not...
No, the advance party, the British advance party wasn't quite 800. It was more like a couple hundred.
Oh, it was at least 300, Hal. Yes, it was...
about 85?
Yes, it wasn't... I believe it was a regiment, and I wasn't in the Army, but I believe a normal strength regiment can be as many as 800. You're right. Maybe that wasn't quite 800, but it was definitely hundreds of men
about
in the hundreds. Oh, more than that.
They had
more than
that too.
Yeah. So the Lexington, you just had basically 60 men, maybe 60.
60. I heard about 85.
85. Yeah, that's a high number, and it's interesting. So
a few of them actually kind of snuck away, as the British are saying when they do the reenactment. They have the Captain
John Parker. And
no, the British.
Pitcairn.
Pitcairn, right.
Pitcairn, later killed at Bunker Hill, yes.
And he said, basically, throw down your arms and go home. Damn you rebels.
Yes.
And a few people did. A few people kind of hightailed a couple, but for the most part, they stood their ground.
They stood their ground. So, actually, the leader of the Lexington militia was a man called John Parker, and one of our campers is a direct descendant of John Parker. And the Patriot pastor, Garrett Lear, is also a direct descendant of a man who took a stand that day on Lexington Green. And so you come to Camp Constitution, you get basically blood relatives of men that fought there, and it's a lot of fun. And we have made trips to Lexington in the past.
Yes, we've gone to Lexington.
Concord and so forth. Last year we went out to the great ship, USS Constitution.
And one of our instructors was a former crew member. I think he spent 4 years on that ship. So it was a real treat to have someone who had a lot of experience.
That's right.
Knew the ship very well.
So every year we go to at least one local New England historic site. This year we're going to do two. We're going to do the Tea Party Museum in Boston, and we're also going to do Massachusetts State House.
There's another interesting historical aside. We over the years we've visited the Uncle Sam house in Mason, New Hampshire.
Right.
And even to this day, most people don't know that Uncle Sam was a real person. Now, he didn't wear the funny-looking outfit that you see. That was a creation of Thomas Nast.
Right.
But Sam Wilson, he was a very young boy living in Arlington when Paul Revere came
through. That's
and
right.
Actually, he was about 10 or 11, maybe 12. His father participated in the Tea Party. His father and older brothers were actually at Bunker Hill. He wanted to participate, but he did go out and run. He was a courier, and they after within a year or so they moved to the town of Mason, New Hampshire. It's actually far from where.
But one of those houses in his neighborhood was shot up pretty good, and you can still see the bullet holes.
You can see the bullet holes. That was on the way back after Concord. That's when the British got
We
there.
drove them back.
There.
We whipped them good.
There was
Kids like to hear that we whipped them good.
There was a massacre at that house in Arlington, too.
Oh, my goodness.
There was some colonials that were in the basement, and the British came in and they surrendered. They just gunned them down. There was about 10 or so that were killed. But anyway, no, Paul Revere, after he got to the Hancock Clark House, he went further. He went as far as Lincoln, which is just the next town over, and he was actually arrested by the British.
Well, this is interesting. So we get back. What did I tell you earlier? The horse was like a Porsche, Ferrari. So what did they do? They didn't really know who he was. He was just riding around late at night. But they arrested him, and they took his horse, the Brits. They took the horse. He was on a good horse.
They stole the horse.
Yes. Okay, so in those days, you could be a judge of a good horse. Deacon Larson's, I think it was a mare, a very good horse. I forget the name of the horse.
I don't know if it's known to history, the name of the horse, is it?
But at that time, basically the three of them, who's the third one? Samuel Prescott. So you have three men. You have Paul Revere, you have Dawes. They met up at in Lexington at the Hancock Clark House, and then they rode out together. They were joined by Prescott, Samuel Prescott, and they're in Lincoln, and they hear the British approaching, and they take off in different directions. Revere is the one that got arrested. Prescott makes it through to Concord. He's the one that makes it through, and his alarm basically alarms the countryside to far and beyond, up to New Hampshire, up to Rindge, New Hampshire. And basically what happened was after the British mowed through Lexington and shot this poor undersized company down, and they were just there. They were not there to confront them. And, okay, this is another thing, too. This is a right that I'm going to wrong right now.
We got 3 minutes left, so we got to
really quickly
wrap it up there.
A lot of times people say, a lot of historical accounts, people say nobody knows who fired the first shot. Well, Pastor Garrett Lear said under oath later when they were giving their accounts under an oath to God to a man, they said they did not fire the first shot. They were under military orders not to fire the first shot. So as far as I'm concerned, and Pastor Lear is concerned, we did not fire the first shot. The British fired the first shot. They, as Cal said, they said, "Damn you rebels, lay down your arms." We did not lay down our arms.
I don't think they have an order to fire, but some of the
a little jittery,
undisciplined soldier just taking a 10-mile,
pot shot or whatever,
15-mile, 20-mile march in the cold probably said, you know, I'm a little ticked off here.
That is right. And then basically all of the militias to the north massed together in an organized army. And so by the time the British got to Concord, we had an army. We drove them back, and we whipped them good, and we bottled them up in Boston for months and months after that.
Well, you're listening to Camp Constitution
Camp Constitution
on WBCQ The Planet, which is heard every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. We also take these shows and we put them into video format. You'll hear them on YouTube. If you'd like more information on Camp Constitution, campconstitution.net, and also when you go to the website, you can find a link to our YouTube channel. We're having a great camp this year, so I think Tom's going to end with some a little bit of music, brother.
Well, last night, and I read it tomorrow. It's that nobody's waking up. What's going on around here? Freedom! Freedom! Rider in the night. Are you coming with us to go in now without a fight? Freedom! Rider in the night. Are you coming with us to go in